In the 19th century, Queen Victoria presided over an empire that stretched across continents, reshaped nations, and redefined monarchy. But behind the ceremonies, portraits, and politics stood another story, one built not on crowns and parliaments, but on family. Victoria had 4 sons. Each was born into a world of expectation, pressure, and unrelenting public scrutiny. One would grow up to rule an empire, another would command fleets and inherit a German duchy, a third would become the perfect Victorian soldier, and the youngest, brilliant but frail, would live a brief life shadowed by illness, but filled with promise. Today, we take a clear chronological look at each of them. No myths, no dramatics, just the factual record of how they were born, how they grew up, what careers they built, who they married, the children they left behind, and how they shaped the world after Victoria. This is what happened to Queen Victoria's sons. Albert Edward was born on November 9, 1841, at Buckingham Palace. He arrived as the second child and first son of Queen Victoria and Prince Albert. The birth carried immediate constitutional significance. Victoria had ascended the throne in 1837, and the arrival of a male heir secured the succession for the next generation. The infant was named Albert Edward, placing his father's name first in a deliberate statement of dynastic intent. Within days, he was created Prince of Wales, the traditional title for the British heir apparent. From the moment of his birth, his life was defined by his future role. He would be king, and everything in his upbringing was designed with that destination in mind. Albert Edward's early years were governed by strict routine and high expectation. Victoria and Albert approached child-rearing with moral seriousness and systematic planning. The nursery was organized, disciplined, and closely supervised. Albert Edward and his siblings followed a daily schedule that included meals at set times, structured play, and early religious instruction. The prince consort, Albert, took particular interest in his eldest son's development. He believed that the future king must be morally upright, intellectually capable, and emotionally disciplined. Victoria shared these views. Both parents worried about the boy's temperament. He was described as lively, easily distracted, and prone to tantrums. These traits alarmed his parents, who feared he lacked the self-control required for kingship. The nursery staff reported his behavior regularly, and corrective measures were applied. Affection was present but restrained. The emphasis was on duty, character, and preparation. Albert Edward's formal education began early and intensified as he grew older. His father designed a rigorous curriculum that included languages, history, mathematics, science, and moral philosophy. Multiple tutors were employed, and the boy's progress was monitored constantly. The approach was intended to produce a model constitutional monarch. In practice, it produced stress and resistance. Albert Edward struggled academically. He found the workload overwhelming and the expectations impossible to meet. His tutors reported frustration. His parents expressed disappointment. Comparisons to his sister Victoria, the Princess Royal, who excelled in her studies, only deepened the sense of inadequacy. At 17, he was sent to Oxford, where he studied without formally enrolling as a degree candidate. His time there was closely supervised. He lived apart from other students and followed a controlled schedule. A year later, he transferred to Cambridge under similar conditions. The experience provided some social exposure, but little academic success. His parents remained dissatisfied. The gap between expectation and performance defined his youth. As Albert Edward entered young adulthood, his parents began introducing him to public life. In 1860, at 18, he embarked on a tour of Canada and the United States, the first visit by a British heir to North America. The tour was a diplomatic success. He was received warmly, and his natural sociability proved effective in public settings. The trip demonstrated his potential as a royal representative, but it also revealed tensions. During military training in Ireland the following year, he became involved in a brief affair with an actress named Nellie Clifton. The liaison was discovered, and news reached his parents. Prince Albert, already in declining health, traveled to Cambridge to confront his son. The episode devastated the prince consort, who saw it as a moral failure. Weeks later, Albert died. Victoria blamed her son for contributing to her husband's death, a belief she held for years. The scandal reinforced her view that Albert Edward lacked judgment and self-discipline. It marked the beginning of a long, strained relationship between mother and heir. In 1863, Albert Edward married Princess Alexandra of Denmark. The match had been arranged by his parents before Prince Albert's death, and Victoria approved of the choice. Alexandra was beautiful, well-mannered, and from a respectable Protestant royal family. The wedding took place at St. George's Chapel, Windsor, on March 10, 1863. Public reaction was enthusiastic. Alexandra quickly became popular with the British public. She was admired for her elegance, her warmth, and her ability to navigate the public role with apparent ease. The marriage provided stability in Albert Edward's personal life. Alexandra was patient, forgiving, and committed to her duties. She managed the household, raised their children, and maintained public appearances even as her husband's social life and extramarital liaisons became widely known. The couple maintained a functional partnership despite these strains. Alexandra's deafness, which worsened over time, and her occasional withdrawal from public life did not diminish her standing. She remained a respected figure throughout her husband's life and into her widowhood. Albert Edward and Alexandra had 6 children. The first, Albert Victor, was born in January 1864. He was followed by George in 1865, Louise in 1867, Victoria in 1868, Maud in 1869, and a 6th son, Alexander John, in 1871. Alexander John was born prematurely and died the following day. The surviving children were raised at Marlborough House in Sandringham, with Alexander taking a close role in their upbringing. Albert Victor, as the eldest son, was groomed for future kingship. His education followed the same intensive model his father had endured, and, like his father, he struggled. He served in the military and undertook royal duties, but his early death in 1892 from pneumonia at the age of 28 ended his potential reign. George, the second son, became heir after his brother's death. He had trained for a naval career and was not initially expected to be king. In 1893, he married Mary of Teck, who had been engaged to Albert Victor before his death. George eventually succeeded his father as King George V in 1910. The 3 daughters made significant dynastic marriages. Louise married the Duke of Fife. Victoria remained unmarried and lived with her parents. Maud married Prince Karl of Denmark, who became King Haakon VII of Norway in 1905, making her queen consort. Albert Edward spent nearly 60 years as Prince of Wales, longer than any heir in British history. During this period, Victoria excluded him from political decision-making and kept him at a distance from state affairs. She did not trust his discretion and disapproved of his lifestyle. He filled his time with social engagements, travel, and public ceremonies. He became known for his lavish entertaining, his interest in horse racing, his close relationships with wealthy and influential figures, and his involvement in fashionable society. Criticism of his lifestyle was common, but he also built a public role. He opened buildings, supported charities, and represented the monarchy at events across Britain and abroad. His diplomatic skills, particularly his ease with foreign royalty and political figures, proved valuable. When Victoria died in January 1901, he ascended the throne as King Edward VII. His reign lasted 9 years. He took an active interest in foreign affairs, cultivated relationships with European leaders, and supported the Entente Cordiale with France. His public image softened in kingship. He was seen as dignified, capable, and more engaged than many had expected. His reign ended with his death in 1910. Edward VII died on May 6, 1910, at Buckingham Palace after a series of heart attacks. He was 68. His funeral was attended by European royalty from across the continent, a reflection of his personal and political connections. He was succeeded by his son George V, who reigned through World War I and the transformation of the British monarchy into its modern form. Edward's descendants shaped European royalty throughout the 20th century. Through George V, his line continued as the ruling house of the United Kingdom. Through his daughter Maud, his descendants became the Norwegian royal family. His grandchildren included kings, queens, and consorts across Europe. Edward's legacy is debated. He did not fundamentally change the British constitutional system, and his reign was brief. But he restored public warmth to the monarchy after Victoria's long seclusion, and his diplomatic instincts helped Britain navigate a complex European political environment. His long wait for the throne and his complicated relationship with his mother remain defining aspects of his story. Prince Alfred Ernest Albert was born on August 6, 1844, at Windsor Castle. He was the second son of Queen Victoria and Prince Albert, arriving 3 years after his elder brother. His position as a younger son removed him from the direct line of royal succession and allowed for a different kind of future. From early in his life, it was understood that Alfred would not inherit the British throne and would therefore need a career suited to his rank, but separate from the central responsibilities of monarchy. His father identified the Royal Navy as the appropriate path. A naval career carried prestige, offered useful service to the nation, and provided structure for a prince who would not reign. Alfred's trajectory was set before he reached adolescence. Alfred's childhood followed the same structured, disciplined model that governed the upbringing of all of Victoria and Albert's children. He was educated by private tutors in languages, mathematics, history, and science. Religious instruction was included, and moral discipline was emphasized. Unlike his elder brother, Alfred showed less resistance to the academic expectations placed on him. He was described as more even-tempered and focused. His early interests leaned toward the sea. Reports from his tutors noted his fascination with ships, navigation, and maritime history. This inclination fit well with the career path his parents had chosen for him. He was encouraged in these interests, and preparations for a naval life began. His childhood was less fraught than Albert Edward's, partly because the expectations were different. He was not being trained to rule, and the intense scrutiny that accompanied the heir's upbringing did not apply to him in the same way. Alfred entered the Royal Navy as a midshipman in 1858 at the age of 14. His training followed the standard naval curriculum, though his royal status meant he was never anonymous. He studied seamanship, navigation, gunnery, and naval discipline. He served aboard HMS Euryalus and later HMS St. George, gaining practical experience in fleet operations. His instructors reported that he took the work seriously and performed competently. He passed his examinations and was promoted according to the expected timeline. By 1863, he had reached the rank of captain. His early service included deployments in the Mediterranean and assignments that took him across British naval stations. He was described as professional, disciplined, and committed to his duties. The naval career provided him with a clear identity and a role that was his own, separate from the constraints and expectations that defined his elder brother's life. It also kept him away from court for long periods, which both parents appreciated. Alfred's naval career took him to distant parts of the British Empire. In 1867, he undertook an official tour of Australia, becoming the first member of the British royal family to visit the continent. The tour included stops in Adelaide, Melbourne, Sydney, and other colonial cities. He was received with public enthusiasm, and the visit strengthened the symbolic connection between the monarchy and the Australian colonies. The trip was not without incident. In March 1868, while visiting Sydney, Alfred was shot in the back by an Irish nationalist named Henry James O'Farrell during a public picnic. The wound was serious but not fatal. Alfred recovered, and the incident generated widespread sympathy. O'Farrell's was quickly tried and executed. The event highlighted both the risks of royal public life and the political tensions within the empire. Alfred also traveled to South Africa and other colonial territories in his capacity as a senior naval officer. These voyages reinforced his public image as a dutiful, active member of the royal family who contributed directly to Britain's global presence. In 1874, Alfred married Grand Duchess Maria Alexandrovna of Russia, the daughter of Tsar Alexander II. The marriage was politically significant. It represented a rare, direct marital link between the British and Russian royal families at a time when the two empires were often rivals. Victoria had reservations about the match. She found Maria distant and difficult, and the cultural differences between British and Russian court life created friction. Maria, for her part, found British royal life less grand than what she had known in St. Petersburg. She maintained Russian customs within her household, brought Russian staff, and insisted on certain protocols that reflected her imperial upbringing. The marriage produced 5 children, but it was not warm. Alfred and Maria maintained separate social circles and spent considerable time apart. Despite the personal strains, the marriage fulfilled its dynastic function and produced heirs who would carry forward both British and Russian connections. Alfred and Maria had 5 children: Alfred, known as Young Affy, Marie, Victoria Melita, Alexandra, and Beatrice. The daughters married into European royal families and carried the family's influence across the continent. Marie became Queen of Romania, marrying Crown Prince Ferdinand in 1893. She played a significant public and political role in Romania, particularly during World War I, and became one of the most prominent royal figures of her generation. Victoria Melita married Ernst Ludwig, Grand Duke of Hesse, in 1894, though the marriage ended in divorce in 1901. She later married Grand Duke Kirill Vladimirovich of Russia, a controversial union that brought her into Russian imperial circles. Alexandra married Ernst, Prince of Hohenlohe-Langenburg. Beatrice married Alfonso, Infante of Spain. The son, Young Affy, was the only male heir. He was expected to inherit his father's titles, but his life was troubled. He died in 1899 at the age of 24 under circumstances officially attributed to tuberculosis, though rumors of suicide persisted. His early death complicated the succession and added personal tragedy to Alfred's later years. In 1893, Alfred's uncle, Ernest II, Duke of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, died without legitimate heirs. Under the rules governing the German duchy, the title passed to the next eligible male in the family line. Albert Edward, as heir to the British throne, declined the duchy. It therefore passed to Alfred. In August 1893, Alfred became Duke of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, inheriting the family's German territories and responsibilities. The transition required him to leave active naval service and relocate to Coburg. He took up residence in the ducal palaces and assumed the administrative, ceremonial, and political duties of a German sovereign prince. The role was unfamiliar, and Alfred found it difficult. He was trained as a naval officer, not a German prince. The duchy's politics, its relationship with the German Empire, and its internal management were new challenges. He performed his duties but never fully adapted to the role. His final years were marked by personal loss, administrative strain, and declining health. Alfred died on July 30, 1900, at Schloss Rosenau near Coburg. He was 55. His death followed years of deteriorating health, exacerbated by heavy drinking and the stress of his dual roles as British prince and German duke. He was buried in the ducal cemetery at Coburg. Because his son had predeceased him and his daughters could not inherit under the duchy's male-only succession law, the title passed to his nephew, Prince Charles Edward, the posthumous son of Prince Leopold. Alfred's legacy is less prominent than that of his elder brother, but it is significant. Through his naval service, he represented the monarchy and parts of the empire that rarely saw royalty. His marriage connected Britain and Russia in a period of tension. His daughters, particularly Marie of Romania, carried his influence forward and shaped European royal and political life in the early 20th century. His line continued through his descendants in Romania, Germany, Spain, and Russia, though his own male line ended with his son's death. Prince Arthur William Patrick Albert was born on May 1, 1850, at Buckingham Palace. He was the 3rd son and 7th child of Queen Victoria and Prince Albert. His birth came during a period when the royal family was well established and the succession was secure. Arthur's arrival on the Duke of Wellington's 81st birthday was noted with satisfaction by his parents, who admired the Duke. The child was named in part after the Duke, and the coincidence of the date was seen as auspicious. From early in his life, Arthur enjoyed a warmer relationship with his mother than his elder brothers did. Victoria found him dutiful, obedient, and temperamentally suited to the expectations placed on him. She referred to him affectionately and expressed confidence in his character. This favor shaped his upbringing and his later life. Unlike Albert Edward, he was trusted. Unlike Alfred, he was not sent far away. Arthur remained close to the center of royal life while building his own career. Arthur's early education followed the now established pattern for Victoria's children. Private tutors instructed him in languages, history, mathematics, and science. Religious and moral instruction were included, Unlike his eldest brother, Arthur responded well to discipline. He was described as focused, serious, and eager to meet expectations. His parents appreciated his cooperative nature. From an early age, a military career was envisioned for him. The British Army was considered the appropriate service branch, and Arthur showed interest in it. His father, Prince Albert, oversaw the early stages of his education before his death in 1861. After Albert's death, Victoria continued to guide Arthur's development with the same principles her husband had established. Arthur's temperament made the process smoother than it had been with his brothers. He accepted guidance, followed instructions, and seemed to internalize the values his parents emphasized. Arthur began his military education at the Royal Military Academy, Woolwich, in 1866. He was 16 years old. The academy trained officers for the Royal Artillery and Royal Engineers, and Arthur's time there was marked by solid performance and adherence to standards. He completed his coursework and received his commission in 1868. He was assigned to the Royal Engineers, though he later transferred to the Rifle Brigade. His military career was real, not ceremonial. He trained with his units, participated in maneuvers, and advanced through the ranks based on service time and competence. His royal status meant he received public attention, but within the Army, he was expected to perform his duties like any other officer. He took this seriously. His early postings included service in Canada and assignments in Britain. He approached military life with the same discipline that had characterized his childhood, and his superiors found him capable and reliable. Arthur's military service took him across the British Empire. In the 1870s, he served in Canada, where he was stationed with his regiment and participated in training exercises and garrison duties. In 1882, he was part of the British force sent to Egypt during the Anglo-Egyptian War. He saw active combat during the campaign and was present at the Battle of Tel el-Kebir, a decisive British victory. His participation in real military action distinguished him from many royal figures whose military roles were largely symbolic. In the following years, he continued to serve in various capacities, including assignments in India and other imperial territories. He rose steadily through the ranks, achieving the rank of Field Marshal in 1902. His promotions were based on seniority and service, and while his royal status certainly played a role in his career trajectory, he fulfilled the duties expected of an officer at each level. He was respected within the military establishment and seen as a serious professional soldier. In 1879, Arthur married Princess Louise Margaret of Prussia, the daughter of Prince Frederick Charles of Prussia. The marriage was a solid dynastic match that linked the British and Prussian royal families. The wedding took place at St. George's Chapel, Windsor, on March 13, 1879. Louise Margaret was well regarded, and the marriage was stable and affectionate. The couple had 3 children: Margaret, born in 1882, Arthur, born in 1883, and Patricia, born in 1886. The family maintained a household that balanced royal duties with a degree of domestic normalcy. Arthur's wife supported his public role and managed their home with competence. The children were raised with the same discipline and structure that had characterized Arthur's own upbringing. Margaret married Crown Prince Gustav Adolf of Sweden, later King Gustav VI Adolf, becoming Queen of Sweden. Arthur, the younger, pursued a military career but faced scandal and was stripped of his British titles after his marriage was annulled. Patricia married Admiral Sir Alexander Ramsay and lived a long life in Britain. The family remained close, and Arthur maintained strong relationships with his children and grandchildren throughout his life. In 1911, Arthur was appointed Governor-General of Canada, the representative of the British Crown in the Canadian government. He served in this role until 1916. The appointment reflected his experience, his public reputation, and his long association with the Empire. His tenure coincided with the outbreak of World War I in 1914, which added significant responsibility to the role. Arthur represented the monarchy during a period of national mobilization and sacrifice. He supported Canada's war effort, visited troops, and maintained public morale. His military background gave him credibility in this context. He worked closely with Canadian political leaders and navigated the balance between ceremonial duties and substantive responsibilities. His time in Canada was regarded as successful. He was seen as dignified, Capable and respectful of Canadian institutions, his departure in 1916 was marked by public appreciation for his service. He returned to Britain and continued to undertake royal duties for the remainder of his life. Arthur lived to the age of 91, dying on January 16, 1942, at Bagshot Park in Surrey. He was the last surviving son of Queen Victoria and witnessed the transformations of the 20th century, including 2 world wars, the fall of monarchies across Europe, and the profound social and political changes that reshaped Britain and the world. In his final decades, he remained a senior member of the royal family, attending ceremonies, supporting charitable causes, and representing continuity with the Victorian era. His longevity made him a living link to the past. He saw his nephew George V reign and die, and he lived into the early years of his great-nephew George VI's reign. His descendants carried his line forward into European royalty, particularly through his daughter Margaret's marriage into the Swedish royal family. Arthur's legacy is one of duty, service, and stability. He fulfilled the expectations placed on him without scandal or failure, represented the monarchy across the empire, and maintained the values his parents had instilled in him throughout a long and active life. Prince Leopold George Duncan. Albert was born on April 7, 1853, at Buckingham Palace. He was the 8th child and 4th son of Queen Victoria and Prince Albert. His birth was notable in medical history because Victoria was administered chloroform during labor, one of the early uses of anesthesia in royal childbirth. The Queen's acceptance of this practice helped legitimize its use in obstetrics. Leopold's early infancy appeared normal, but within months, it became clear that something was wrong. He bruised easily, bled excessively from minor injuries, and experienced painful swelling in his joints. By the time he was a toddler, the diagnosis was understood. He had hemophilia, a hereditary bleeding disorder that prevents blood from clotting properly. The condition was incurable and potentially fatal. Leopold's hemophilia shaped every aspect of his life from that point forward. It dictated what he could do, where he could go, and how he was treated by those around him. Leopold's childhood was defined by caution and restriction. Physical activities that other children took for granted were forbidden. He could not run, climb, or play roughly. Even minor falls could result in dangerous internal bleeding. His movements were watched constantly, and his activities were carefully controlled. This isolation had emotional and social consequences. He was often separated from his siblings during their games and outings. He spent long periods confined indoors. The restrictions frustrated him, and reports from his caregivers noted his resentment and sadness. Despite these limitations, his intellectual education proceeded. Private tutors instructed him in languages, literature, history, mathematics, and science. He proved to be intelligent, curious, and academically capable. His parents recognized his intellectual gifts and encouraged them. His father, Prince Albert, took particular interest in Leopold's education before his death in 1861. After Albert's death, Victoria continued to oversee her youngest son's development, though the loss of her husband deepened her protectiveness and anxiety about Leopold's health. In 1872, Leopold entered Christ Church, Oxford. He was 19 years old, and the decision to send him to university reflected both his intellectual abilities and his parents' recognition that he needed a meaningful role. His time at Oxford was among the happiest periods of his life. He lived in college, attended lectures, and participated in intellectual and social life. He made friends, joined discussions, and engaged with ideas in ways that his restricted childhood had not allowed. He studied literature, history, and modern languages. He was known for his sharp mind, his wit, and his genuine interest in learning. He did not take a formal degree, as was common for royal students at the time, but his time at Oxford gave him a sense of purpose and identity beyond his illness. He formed lasting friendships and developed intellectual interests that continued throughout his life. Oxford represented freedom and normalcy, a brief period when his life was defined by more than his medical condition. Leopold wanted to serve in the military. His brothers had pursued careers in the Navy and Army, and he longed for the same kind of active public service. He admired their achievements and resented his exclusion. But his hemophilia made military service impossible. The physical demands, the risk of injury, and the conditions of military life were incompatible with his condition. His mother and his doctors refused to allow it. Leopold pressed the issue repeatedly. He argued that he could serve in an administrative or advisory capacity, that his rank would protect him from frontline danger, and that he had the right to contribute. Victoria rejected these arguments. Her refusal was rooted in genuine fear for his safety, but it was also another reminder of his limitations. The denial deepened his frustration and sense of exclusion. He was a royal prince, trained and educated like his brothers, but unable to pursue the same paths. This tension remained unresolved throughout his life. In 1881, Queen Victoria created Leopold, Duke of Albany. The title gave him a formal position within the royal hierarchy and a degree of independence. He undertook public duties, attended ceremonies, and represented the monarchy at events. He supported charitable causes, particularly those related to the arts, education, and medical research. He became involved with organizations that promoted access to education and supported people with disabilities, causes that reflected his own experiences. He gave speeches, opened buildings, and fulfilled the ceremonial responsibilities expected of a royal duke. These activities gave him purpose and allowed him to contribute publicly. But his role was always constrained by his health. He could not travel freely, could not commit to extended tours, and had to manage his schedule around his physical limitations. He performed his duties with competence and dedication, but the constant management of his condition remained a defining reality. In 1882, Leopold married Princess Helen of Waldeck and Pyrmont. The marriage was arranged with the approval of Queen Victoria, who found Helen suitable and hoped the marriage would provide Leopold with stability and companionship. The wedding took place at St. George's Chapel, Windsor, on April 27, 1882. Helen was 20 years old. Leopold was 28. The marriage was affectionate and supportive. Helen understood Leopold's condition and managed their household with care. In 1883, their first child, Princess Alice, was born. She was healthy and became a source of joy for Leopold. He was devoted to her and took an active interest in her upbringing. Helen was pregnant with their second child when Leopold died in 1884. The child, a son named Charles Edward, was born 4 months after his father's death. Charles Edward carried hemophilia and became Duke of Albany as an infant. He later inherited the Duchy of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha after his uncle Alfred's death. Leopold's brief marriage and the birth of his children represented a period of personal happiness, cut short by his early death. In March 1884, Leopold traveled to Cannes in the south of France, seeking warmer weather to ease his joint pain. On March 27th, he slipped and fell in his residence, the Villa Nevada. The fall resulted in a blow to the head. Internal bleeding in the brain followed, a cerebral hemorrhage caused by the trauma and exacerbated by his hemophilia. He lost consciousness and died early the next morning, on March 28, 1884. He was 30 years old. His death was sudden but not unexpected given his condition. Any injury carried the risk of fatal bleeding, and his family had lived with that awareness throughout his life. His body was returned to Britain, and he was buried at St. George's Chapel, Windsor. Victoria was devastated. She had lost her youngest son, the child she had tried so hard to protect. Leopold's death was a reminder of the fragility that had always defined his existence. Leopold's daughter, Princess Alice, lived a long and active life. She married Prince Alexander of Teck, later the Earl of Athlone, and had 3 children. She became a prominent member of the British royal family, undertaking public duties and representing the monarchy well into the 20th century. She died in 1981 at the age of 97, the longest-lived grandchild of Queen Victoria. Leopold's son, Charles Edward, succeeded him as Duke of Albany and later became Duke of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha. His life was controversial. He lived in Germany, became involved in German nationalism, and supported the Nazi regime in the 1930s and 1940s. His British titles were stripped in 1919 under the Titles Deprivation Act. His German career and political choices cast a shadow over Leopold's legacy. Leopold's hemophilia was inherited through the female line and appeared in several of his descendants and in other European royal families through Queen Victoria's daughters. The genetic legacy of the disease shaped royal families across Europe and became a subject of historical and medical study. Leopold's life, though brief, represented both the possibilities and the limitations imposed by his condition, and his descendants carried forward both his blood and the complexities of his inheritance.